if I wanted to find out what is the name or which array we are using in a program, then it is mandatory to give a name of an array. Whole number can be either positive or negative, but it should not contain any fractional part. That is the main thing. So 9 will going to be assigned as a first element if this considered as a name of an array. When we are declaring an array or when we are specifying the size of an array, at that time continuous memory location will going to be given. Hello everyone, welcome back to the session 2 on chapter 11, that is arrays. I am Rohini TS from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru. So in the previous session of this chapter, we have discussed regarding the introduction part. That is, what do you mean by array and what are the fundamentals of an array, right? So as we all know that array is nothing but it is a collection of homogeneous elements. That is what it will going to hold same data kind of elements under the single name. That is the definition of an array. That is what I have discussed regarding the introduction part, as well as we will get to know regarding this fundamentals of an array, how this array is used and how the accessing of an array element will going to take place, what is the address of first location or what is the address of first element of an array and how it will be accessed, how the arrangement of one elements to another elements will going to take place, everything that I have discussed. And also I have discussed regarding the types of an array. How many types we have? We have 3 types in an array. One is one-dimensional array, two-dimensional array, and another one is multi-dimensional array. So if you have only one subscript, if it is representing single subscript or a single position of an element in an array, then that is 1D. Then 2D or two-dimensional is what? Array will going to have the 2 subscript and each subscript will going to represent the position of an element in an array. Multi-dimension is more than 2 dimensions. So any other dimensions other than 1 and 2 will be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So in our today's session, we are going to learn completely regarding this one-dimensional array. So that is what you mean by one-dimensional array and how we are going to declare the one-dimensional array, then how the initialization of an one-dimensional array will going to take place. I have to give some initial value to the array when we are declaring it. That is what initialization is all about. Then how we are going to access the elements of one-dimensional array. Along with the program, I am going to discuss. That is what? Reading and displaying of the elements of an array by making use of this C++ program. So let me get into the today's session, that is regarding one-dimensional array. Then what you mean by this one-dimensional array? It is also type of an array. One-dimensional array is also type of an array. And array will going to hold which kind of data? Is it of heterogeneous or different kinds of data? Obviously no. It will going to hold only similar data type. It will going to hold only the data which is of the same data type under a single name. So now we'll see regarding this one-dimensional array. So as we all know that one-dimensional array is also type of an array. And we know what is array is all about. It will going to hold similar kind of data elements which is of the same data type under a single name. So what about this one-dimensional array? How it will going to be represented? We'll see now. It is also an array in which each element is going to be accessed. We are fetching the content of that element by making use of only one subscript. By making use of only one subscript, or subscript is also known as what? Index. So we are going to use index or indices, that is more than one. Then we are going to access the elements of an array. So if I have hundreds of elements in my array, then I can access 50th element, 90th element. I can access any element. But how can I access? I must know the position, where it is exactly in my array. Then only it is possible for us to access the content of that particular array. Then it is mandatory to have subscript. Subscript will going to returns the position, or it going to represents the position of an element in the array. For that purpose, we are going to use a subscript. If there is only one subscript, then that will be considered as what? One-dimensional array. So we'll see the declaration, how we are going to do the array declaration. So before that, we have to understand how we will get to know the size of an array. So as we all know that how many element is there in an array, that will going to specifies the size. For example, if I have hundreds elements in my array, then I have to find out what is the size of an array. So then how we are going to calculate that? So I have to consider the data type, which kind of data it is holding, whether it is related to integer or a float, character. So as we all know that float will going to hold 4 bytes, integer is going to hold 2 bytes. That will be mainly based on the type of processor, whether it is 32-bit or 64-bit. Based on that, it can be considered as 2 or 4 bytes of memory. And for char, it will going to hold 1 byte of data, or it will going to hold 1 byte of data and information in the particular data type called char. So we are going to multiply the data type along with the number of elements. Then it will going to give the size of an array. So we'll see now the number of elements that can be stored in the array is called as size of the array. What is the capacity of an array? How many elements it is storing? So that will going to represents the size of an array. So that represents the number of element which can be stored in an array will going to be termed as size of an array. The size of an array must be constant or an expression that it will going to evaluate to a constant and should also be an integer. So we are going to use the size of an array as a constant, because when we are declaring it, then only we are going to give the size of an array. Then it must be a constant value, but along with that it must be integer, because whatever we are going to write between the subscript must be an integer. Apart from that, it won't take any values other than the whole numbers. I cannot give the address as 2.5, 3.5, not like that. So we have to give the values of a subscript or a element as 2, 3, like that. So it will going to represent the number of elements in an array. The size should be enclosed within square brackets. How we are going to give the size then? That will going to be enclosed between the square brackets. So we'll see the declaration, then you will get to know how we are going to declare an array. So what is the declaration syntax? Here we have a syntax in order to declare one-dimensional array, and it is also important. Give a declaration of one-dimensional array along with an example. Can be asked for 2 marks or for 1 mark question. Then what is the syntax? Here we have a data type that specifies the type of a data which the array is holding. What we have, what is the data type is preceded by. What we have next, that specifies array name. How can I find a people? How can I recognize them? Everybody has name. By their name, we are going to recognize or we are going to identify a people, or every object will going to have a name. In the same way, if I wanted to find out what is the name or which array we are using in a program, then it is mandatory to give a name of an array. For that purpose, we are going to give array name. So within the square bracket, I have to mention the size of an array. Okay, so that specifies the maximum number of elements that an array can going to hold. Okay, this array name is the name of an array, and within the square bracket we are going to specify the size of an array. Size represents number of an element this array will going to hold. At last I have to give semicolon. Why? Because that is a termination of a statement. Then what is the example? Consider data type. I can take either float, char, int, anything we can take. But what are the data type we are taking? That must reflect on the type of element. If I am considering or if I am taking int as a data type, then I have to take the elements only which is belongs to the integer. It must be a whole numbers. By declaring int, I cannot take float numbers. But by taking float, we can declare integer or a whole numbers. But that will going to be preceded by 2.00, 3.00 in that manner. We'll see the example. Let me consider int as a data type and name of an array is A. What is the name I am giving to the array? A, and I am taking the size as 5. At last, semicolon. So what it indicates? Int is a data type, A is the name of an array. Within the square bracket, don't write parentheses or don't write flower braces and all. It's supposed to be a square bracket. So then only that represents the size of an array. So then here 5 is the size. That means what? This A is the name of an array. It will going to hold up to 5 elements, not more than that. It will going to hold maximum of 5 elements. For that purpose, we are going to represent the size of an array at last semicolon. In the same way, I can take float, capital B, and one more thing. This whatever the name that we are going to give for an array should follow the rule of identifier. It should not be a number. It should not preceded by double underscore. Those kind of things is not allowed when we are declaring the identifier. Okay. So B 10. So this will going to hold up to 10 elements in this B array. And also I can take char name of 20. So this name is an array will going to hold 20 characters or 20 elements will going to be stored in this array. So now we'll see the initialization of one-dimensional array. So as we all know that initialization is nothing but giving some initial value to the variable at the time of its declaration. So as we all know that now we have declared an array. I have used data type, array name as well as the size within the square bracket. When I'm declaring that, at the time only we are going to give a name or we are going to give some value to the elements of an array. That is considered as what? Initialization of one-dimensional array. So we'll see, you can give the values to each array element when the array is first defined or declared. So we'll see the example. First, let me declare one array. Let me consider the data type as int and I'm taking a name of an array as 5a and size of an array is 5. Data type is integer and name of an array is a and its size is 5. If it is 5, this is understood that we can hold or this array will going to hold only 5 elements, maximum of 5 elements. Is equal to, by making use of this assignment operator, we are going to do the initialization of one-dimensional array. Is equal to, within the flat brace, I have to give the values of each element of an array. Let me consider 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. At last, close the flat brace, then put semicolon. So, integer data type is the name of an array, its size is 5. It will going to hold 5 elements, maximum of 5 elements. Then 10 will be considered as my first element of an array, 20 second element, 30 third element and 40 is the fourth element, 50 is the fifth element. How we are going to represent it then? I have to take this brackets and let me consider 10, 20, 30, 40 and one more element 50. What is the name of an array? That is A, right? What is the address of first element? A of 0 and address of second element is A of 1, address of third element is A of 2, address of fourth element is A of 3, address of fifth element is A of 4. This is how we are going to represent in the memory space. This kind of initialization or this kind of assigning some value to the array when we are declaring it will going to happen. So we'll see one more example. Here in A of 5 and the elements are 9, minus 5, 6, 2, 8. So you can ask why we are taking minus 5. As we all know that whole number can be either positive or negative, but it should not contain any fractional part. That is the main thing. So 9 will going to be assigned as a first element. If this considered as a name of an array, then size A of 1 and here A of 2 and this will be A of 3 and at last it will be A of 4. All the 5 elements will going to be allocated. So, this specifies the name of an array and this specifies the location. How many subscripts do I have here? That is only one subscript. If it is having only one subscript, then that kind of array will going to be termed as one-dimensional array. This is one method of initialization. So, we'll see another method. So, here what if there is a less number of elements than my given size? So, for example, I am going to take the size as 5, but I am going to give only the value of 3 elements. So, I am left out with 2 more elements. Then what should be added or what should be the element of that rest of 2 elements? it will going to be filled with 0. Then if there is less number of elements specified than the size of an array, the remaining value will going to be filled with 0 by the compiler. By default only it will going to give the 0 as the remaining value if the number of elements is lesser than the specified size. So we'll see now here float w of 5 is equal to, what is the data type? Float we are taking, w is the name of an array and we are taking a size as 5 is equal to, what is the value they are taking? So 1.5, comma 2.8, comma 2.5. What is the size? Size is 5, but I am taking only 3 elements, right? So I am taking only 3 elements. Then what about the remaining 2 elements? That will going to be filled with a 0. So that will going to be filled by 0 by the compiler. So here what is the address of first element? W of 0, here W of 1 and W of 2, W of 3 as well as W of 4. This is another kind of initialization. When we are going to give the exact number of size, exact number of elements, everything will going to be filled. So if I am going to give less elements with a higher size, then the remaining value will going to be filled by zeros. Then we have one more method. I am not going to specify the size, but I am going to take only the elements. At that time, by default, compiler will going to allocate the size. So we'll see the example here. If the array does not include initialization, then the array elements may be initialized to 0. If I am not going to give any elements, for example, int a of 5 is equal to, here I'm just initializing, but I'm not specifying any value. At that time, what will going to happen? By default, this compiler will going to give some junk values. That values will going to be termed as what? Garbage values. That may comprises of collection of any numbers, alphabets, characters. It can be any junk values that is considered as what? Garbage values. So if the array does not include an initialization, then the array elements may going to contain the unexpected values. We can't predict what will going to fill in that array because that will going to be done by compiler. Then that will going to be termed as what? Garbage collection or garbage values. Then, and we have one more scenario here. When an array has explicit initialization, its size can be omitted from the declaration. So that is what? Int a. I am not specifying size. Instead of that, I am going to take 9, 5, minus 6. What we have to understand from this? I have a data type called int and array name is a, but here I am not taking a size. Are we taking a size? No. But I am initializing 9, 5, minus 6. At the time, compiler by default will going to explicitly assign the size as 3. We are not specifying the size, but we are giving the number of elements. Based on that number of elements, size will going to be computed by its own. This can also be one of the possible scenario. Equal number of elements, equal number of size, like more size with less element and no size with elements. These are the 3 scenarios when we are going to initialize one-dimensional array. Okay, this is regarding declaration as well as the initialization. So now we'll see the next one, that is what? Memory representation of one-dimensional array. How array will going to be represented in the memory location. So as we all know that when I'm declaring any variables or when I'm declaring any constant, any identifier is declaring, some memory space will going to be allocated for that variable. Then how the memory location of this array will going to happen in the computer's memory, we'll see now. Consider the elements of one-dimensional arrays are stored in continuous memory location because these are all the linear data structure. One element going to be present after another element. If I am going to give a roll number as 1, 2, 3, 4, that is what? Continuous location, continuous allocation of a numbering. So in this also, when we are declaring an array or when we are specifying the size of an array, at that time continuous memory location will going to be given. So whatever the memory space that is not given by the user, it will going to be given by compiler, and that number can be anything. That can be a combination of numbers or alphabets, alphanumeric, anything it could be, that specifies the memory address or memory location of an element in the computer's memory. So here also you can see one of the example. Here we are declaring char a of 5. That means what? Data type is character and A is the name of an array. And what is the size of an element? That is what? 5. We can store up to 5 elements in this array called capital A. So here you can see the memory representation. So I have to fill the values. Let me consider A, B, C and D and E. Okay, so these 5 are the elements of my array called capital A and its size is 5. Then how can I get to know the memory allocation? It will be in the continuous manner. So if the memory address of the first element is 1000, then what is the next memory address? That is 1001. Why I am taking 1001 after 1000? Because we are taking character data type. And this character data type will going to hold only 1 byte of memory space. If I am taking integer, then it's not the case of integer. That integer data type will going to hold 2 bytes of memory space. At that time, 1001, if it is 1000, next it will going to be 1003, because 1001, 1002 will be in the first position. 1003 and 4 will be in the next position. In that manner, it will going to represent the memory allocation. It will going to represent the elements in the memory. So A, B, C, D, E are the elements of an array called A, and address of first element is A of 0, A of 1, A of 2, A of 3, and last address of the element is A of 4. It is always n minus 1. And the memory address of first element is 1000, next is 1001, 1002, 1003 and 1004. So this is for character data type. We'll see one more example. Here the declaration is what? Int A of 3. Which kind of data type it is? Data type is integer and it will going to hold 2 bytes of memory. Remember, it will going to hold 2 bytes of memory and A of 3. I have 3 elements, or we can store 3 elements in the array called small letter a. Okay. So here let me consider the value 10, 20 and 30. Okay. So 10 is the element, first element, and its memory address is 1000 and 1001 because it is holding 2 bytes of memory. So what is the memory address of next element? That is 1000 to 1003. Why? Because we are taking integer. If it is a float, then there will be 4 division because 4 bytes of memory it will going to hold. Then for 30, 1004, 1005. And the address is A of 0, A of 1 and it is A of 2. Then how we are going to find the size of an array, or how we are going to find the number of elements in an array? For that we have a formula. So we'll see now. Total size is equal to size of type into size of array. Let me consider size of type into, what is the one more? That is size of array. Size of array. Let me consider the previous example. There the declaration was char A of 5. Is it? It will going to hold 5 elements. See, how to find total size? Total size is equal to size of type. Which type it is? It is character. Then how many bytes it will going to take? 1 byte for each element into, what is the size of an array? 5. So, in order to hold the 5 elements in the memory of a character data type, it requires 5 bytes of memory space. That's it. So, we'll do the same thing for this integer. Int is a data type and number of elements are 3. If it is an integer, then it will going to hold 2 bytes of memory space for each element of an array into how many elements I have? I have 3 elements, then it will be 3. So, it requires 6 bytes of memory space in order to hold 3 elements in the memory representation of an array. Okay, so this will going to hold, or this will going to have a memory address in the continuous manner. Continuous memory allocation will going to be takes place for the array in the computer's memory. Okay, this is regarding declaration, initialization of an 1D array or one-dimensional array, as well as the memory representation of one-dimensional array. So now we'll see how we are going to access the elements of an array. So as we all know that when we are going to declare, we are supposed to give the, or we are going to initialize the elements. So instead of initializing, how can I access the elements? If I have a 5 elements, how can I access the first elements? How can I access the second or last element? So for that, we are going to learn with this accessing of the elements of an array. So consider the declaration int a of 5. So what is the declaration I am taking? Int a of 5. So what it means, it will going to hold, or it will going to have a capacity to have a maximum of 5 elements in an array. So let me consider 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. What is the location? A of 0 and it is A of 1 and it is A of 2. This is A of 3. At last A of 4. Okay. So the declaration is int, data type is int and name of an array is A and the maximum size is 5. Then how can I fetch this first element? The name of an array is A. How can I fetch this first element? The address of first element is always 0, 0, 1, 2, 3 up to n minus 1. N is nothing but number of elements. In this case, number of elements is 5. N minus 1 in the sense what? What is the last location of a last element? Location of last element is always n minus 1. Okay. So, how can we are going to access this with the help of program? We'll see now. So, consider the declaration. I have declared int A of 5. Then, we can read the 5 element into the array. The maximum number of element is how much? That is, we can read 5 elements into the array with the input device by writing the following programming segment. We'll see what is this programming segment is all about. Here, we have a cout. So, as we all know that cout is used to represent the output screen, or it is going to represent the statement in the output screen. That is what console output. Enter the elements. Enter the elements. We are taking for loop. Why we are taking for loop here? We are not taking while or do while. Already I have discussed in the control statement. We are not taking while or do while. Why we are taking for loop? When I know the exact number of looping, or when we know the exact number of iteration or repetition of the same process, then we have to take this for loop. I know only I am going to take 5 elements. I know the exact number of repetition or a looping. Then we have to go with a for loop. And how many expressions will be there in for loop? It will going to consist of 3 expressions. First is initialization. So, initialization. Second is condition checking. We have to check the condition. If the condition is true, then it will come to the next line. If the processing is over, again it will go back and it will going to do either increment or decrement based on the things that we are going to write there. So, we'll see now. Cout, enter the elements. I have to give the value for all the 5 elements. So, initially it will be like this. It will be vacant. Okay, then by making use of this for loop, I have to give the value of first element, second element, third, fourth, at last 5th element. Okay, so by making use of the for loop, we are going to do, and we require the cin. Cin A of I. I is nothing but number of iteration. When it is in the location 0, when it is in the location 1, when it is in the location 2, 3, 4. When this condition become false, it will come out. Okay, so this is for what? The code segment in order to read. And how we are going to display then? So for that we are going to use the same thing. Instead of the cin, we are going to use cout. So we are going to display the content which is resides in A of I. A is nothing but name of an array, and I represents the number of iteration or a looping. Okay, so you can see here, see out the elements are, I have taken the elements from the input by making use of this for loop. Now I have to display. So for that also I need to read all the elements from 0 to 5. That is, from first element to last element I have to read. At last, see out A of I. So let me take one example program to make you understand how we are going to access, or that means how we are going to read and display the elements of an array. We'll see the program. Here, the program to read the elements into the array and printing the elements. Very important question for 5 marks. Or sometime it will be asked for 3 marks. So, anyhow, this program is too important. So, we'll see the program one by one. Ash include iostream.h. What is the first line of this program? Ash include iostream.h. As we all know that IO, that is input output stream. So when we are using cout, cin, cerr, clog in the program, then it is mandatory to include this iostream.h header file. Next, ash include conio.h or a conio.h, that is console input output. When we are using getch and clear screen in our program, then it is mandatory to have this conio.h or a conio.h. Next, I have main function, that is what? Void main, where the actual execution of a program will going to start, that is in the void main. So opening of a flower brace indicates opening of a scope of a function. So next, int a of 50, I, n. So a of 50, is this a normal variable or an array variable? It is an array because I have a size of an array which has been represented with a square bracket. So this represents the size of an array. Am I supposed to take all the 50 elements? No, it is the maximum size. That means this array can hold up to 50 elements. We can give 30 elements, 20 elements, any number we can give. At most it can hold 50 elements. Then we have a I, that is for iteration or for looping we are going to use this, and n is nothing but number of elements that specifies the size of an array. So we'll see the program. Clear screen in order to erase the content of previous screen output. Okay, next, cout, enter the size of an array. I have to give the size. Size means what? Number of elements. If I am going to give the size as 3, it will going to hold only 3 elements. But the size is what? It will have a capability to hold 50 elements. But I am giving only 3 elements in the array. Okay. Consider, enter the size of an array. C in n. So which variable we are using? N variable. Let me give the n value as 3. So it will going to hold 3 elements. When I am giving this size, at that time only it will going to create the size for the array. So number of element is 3 now. We'll see the next line. Cout, enter the elements. I have declared an array and I have given the size. That means I have specified the number of elements in an array. It's our duty to give the elements into the array. That means what? We have to read. We have to give the elements into the array. At last we have to print. For reading, we have to use for loop because I am taking more than one element. I am taking, or we know the exact number of iteration or a looping. So it will going to run 3 times because I have only 3 elements. For that purpose, it will going to run thrice. Cout, enter the element. For I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Very important line it is. Less than I is equal to 0. What is the I value right now? It is 0. I will be initialized to 0. Next we have I lesser than n. What is the next condition? I lesser than n. So I know I value, that is 0, is lesser than, what is the n value? 3. Is 0 is lesser than 3? If it is true, this is true here, then it will come to the next line, that is what? C in A of I. So what is the A? That specifies the name of an array and I is nothing but 0. So you got now? We are going to give the size, or we are specifying the first element of an array, that is what? A of 0. So that is the number A of 0. Now, I am going to give some value to the first element of an array. Let me consider that value as 10. Okay. Then, again, once it is over, again it will come back to the expression 3. That is what? Increment operator. I plus plus. I plus plus. What is the I value? 0. 0 plus plus. That means 0 plus 1. So, now my I value is 1. Okay, we are done with first iteration or a first looping got over. Again, it will come here. I is 1 now. Then it will going to check again. I is lesser than n. I value is 1 and n value is 3. It will be constant. Is 1 is lesser than 3? It becomes true. If it is true, again it will come here. Then it will going to take the input for a of I. What is a of I? A of. What is the I value? 1. A of 1. It will going to take the value for the second element. Let me consider that as 15. Okay. This got over. Again it will come for the increment. Now I will going to be incremented by 1. Initially it was 1. 1 plus 1 become 2. So now my I value is 2. Again it will going to check, is 2 is lesser than 3. Is 2 is lesser than 3? Yes, it is true. If it is true, again it will read the content for a of 2. Right? A of 2. For that I have to give value. Let me consider the value as 20. Again I will going to be incremented by 1. Now it becomes 3. I is equal to 3. Is 3 is lesser than, what is the n value? 3. Is 3 is lesser than 3? No. So, if not, then it won't come for the input and it won't increment the I value by 1. So, these 2 lines of code statement got over. Okay. That means we are done with taking or we are done with reading the elements into the array. So, this got over. Next, see out the elements are, now I have to display. I have to display the elements of an array. I have taken 3 elements, 10, 15, 20. It has to be displayed on a screen. Then how we are going to do that? By making use of a cout statement. Cout, the elements are for I is equal to 0, I lesser than n. Okay, I lesser than n because we doesn't know the exact number of elements here. We are giving the n value as 3. So, it will going to take the elements up to 3. So, that when it comes to the I is equal to 0, it will going to display the first element 10. And when it comes to the next element, I is equal to 2, at that time, it will going to give the value 20. And see out A of I. So, what is there in the index I? 0, 1, 2. Those 3 are the index. Then it will going to display all the 3 elements in the output screen. And at last, we have a get ch and closing of flat brace. So, get ch will going to bring all the data to the output screen. So, here you can see one of the example like how the output will going to be generated. So, first line of a cout is what in this program? That is enter the size of an array. So, here the size is 5 and enter the array elements. The elements are 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. At last, in the output statement, the elements are 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. This is how we are going to read and display the content of an array in the output screen. Okay. Very, very important question for 5 as well as the 3 marks. So, this is regarding what? One-dimensional array. So, in the next session, we are going to learn with the two-dimensional array. What and all we have learnt in the one-dimensional array, same thing will going to be happen with the two-dimensional array. Instead of one subscript, we will be having 2 subscript. Along with that, I will be discussing regarding the multi-dimensional array in my next session. It's all about today's session. Let me meet you in the next session with a continuation of a chapter itself. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.